In a luxury restaurant nestled in the center of a cosmopolitan city, Claire, a young black woman in her 30s, wore the waitress uniform with discreet grace. She was well known in this establishment for her rigor, her professionalism, and her unwavering calm. However, beneath her quiet appearance, Claire hid a rare talent, that of the piano. She had learned alone, through perseverance, and each piece she played was a catharsis for her, a form of escape from a world that often did not recognize her for her skills, but for the color of her skin. The restaurant, known for its exorbitant prices and hand-picked clientele, was a place where elegance mixed with arrogance. The customers who frequented there came not only for the quality of the cuisine, but also to display their power and social status. That evening, an influential businessman, Robert Lefebvre, sat at a reserved table, accompanied by several of his partners. Well-dressed, with manners too refined to be sincere, he had immediately noticed Claire when she passed by him to put down a jug of water. He studied her for a moment, a glint of disdain in his eyes. Claire was just another waitress, an insignificant figure in this luxurious place. That kind of woman, he thought condescendingly, had no place in a place like this. He barely saw her as a human being, but rather as a living accessory in this perfect setting. She was just a simple waitress, a black woman, an invisible among the invisible. In his mind, his role was clear: to be discreet, to be forgotten, to exist solely to satisfy the desires of customers like him. He was used to seeing this type of person in these fancy restaurants. People who would shut up and obey, who should never disrupt the image of perfection he valued so much. Robert didn't even notice how blind he was to the humanity that lay behind that calm face, nor to the dignity that Claire carried with such ease. He treated her like an accessory, like an instrument serving his entertainment. A waitress, a reduced, limited role. He found her calm look almost insolent, as if she imagined herself equal to him, to these other customers who had deserved their place in this restaurant through their wealth and their power. As Claire passed by his table, carrying a gleaming silver tray, a treacherous idea germinated in Robert's mind. His smile stretched slowly, his gaze fixing on her with an icy intensity. He felt like he had the power, that he could play with her like a child plays with his toys. He wanted to make her fall, make her vulnerable. A little revenge for the affront he perceived in her stubborn calm, a woman who dared to stand proudly outside of the expectations he had for her. An evil smile appeared on his lips. He watched her walk away, then abruptly said, "Hey, you." Claire stopped, her gaze, still calm, rested on him. She knew what to expect. She could already see the arrogance in his eyes, the arrogance that held within her the idea that he could manipulate others without consequences. It was one of the many times she had to play this role, that of apparent obedience, of one who does not resist, who accepts without flinching. But deep down, she knew he was nothing more than a man who sought to crush what he didn't understand, what he found threatening. Robert, thinking that he had already taken control of the situation, gestured disdainfully at the piano installed near the bay window. The soft sound of music sometimes floated in the air of the restaurant, bringing a warm atmosphere, but this evening, there was no warmth in his gesture. He didn't want music. He simply wanted to reduce her to a mere puppet.
"You know how to play the piano, right?"
"There's a piano here, right?" he said, his tone cold and authoritative, as if asking her to fulfill a function she had not chosen. He left him no freedom of choice, no possibility of dignity. In his eyes, she was simply there to cater to his whims, like a waitress bringing food or drinks. And what he wanted was that little touch of public humiliation that would allow him to feel superior, to confirm his place at the top of the social hierarchy. Claire felt a pang of discomfort grip her, a familiar unease that tightened her stomach. She knew what he was waiting for. It wasn't about music, it was about entertaining him, giving him a show where he would be the king and she would be the object. But she had learned to stay calm in those moments, not to let herself be overcome by emotion, not to give in to the anger that was rising within her. She replied politely, but her words were cold. "Yes, I play sometimes when the opportunity presents itself." Robert smiled more, as if he had won. It wasn't the music that interested her, it wasn't the talent she could offer, it was the power he exercised over her. He knew that most people in this position would feel obligated to fulfill his desires, and he enjoyed the thought. He wanted her to feel trapped, unable to refuse. After all, he was the customer, and in this world, customers were always right, right?
So why don't you come and play a little for us, eh?
Show us what you can do, he said, his tone becoming more mocking, almost a challenge. He raised his glass of wine, observing Claire with a calculating air, while feeling the eyes of the other customers at the table focused on her. The others, like spectators eager for entertainment, waited for what happened next, their eyes full of curiosity and anticipation. The stage was set, and Claire was the unwitting heroine. Claire's face froze slightly for a split second, but it was enough for Robert to understand that he had won. He had pressed where it hurt, he had hit the right place. She hesitated, and during this moment of uncertainty, the murmurs around her grew louder. But she knew, more than ever, that she couldn't afford to refuse. To refuse was to risk his job, his dignity in an already hostile environment. So, after a long breath, Claire forced herself to remain calm and walked away in the direction of the piano. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the room, muffled by murmurs and expectations. As she sat down on the piano bench, a shiver of nervousness passed through her. She felt all eyes on her, the implacable weight of their judgment hanging in the air. The silence fell, heavy, and suddenly, the piano, this instrument which usually accompanied intimate dinners, seemed to become the ground of his humiliation. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to concentrate. Each note seemed carried by the pressure of the gaze, each movement of his fingers, an attempt to resist oppression. At first, the chords were hesitant, hands trembling slightly under the pressure, but as the first notes slipped into the air, a strange, almost cathartic feeling came over Claire. Music became his anchor, a way to escape the heavy atmosphere of the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if the melody allowed her to escape into a world where judgment and mockery had no place. The keys beneath her fingers seemed to breathe with her, and each vibration they created offered her a form of release. She felt the tension in her wrists dissipate little by little. The rhythm of his hands became more fluid, more sure, and his body let itself be carried away by the music. Each note she played seemed to melt into the air, matching the contours of her emotions, her frustrations, but also her hopes. She played for herself in silence, but also for every man and woman who, one day, had to face indifference or contempt. The room, which at first seemed tense, began to hang with every movement of his fingers. The guests, initially disconcerted by the incident, slowly turned towards her. Their murmurs fell silent, replaced by the echo of the music that diffused, enveloping the space with a quiet force. She had chosen a simple but poignant melody, a composition that carried within it everything she had experienced. Music was not just an act of forgetting, it had become an act of resistance. It was as if, with each key touched, Claire was taking action against the injustices she had experienced, against those who, like Robert, believed they could reduce her to a simple invisible figure, to a waitress without history. The contrast between the pure beauty of the melody and the cynicism of its attacker was striking. Music became her weapon, and each note seemed to repel the mockery, the attempts to demean her. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a strong woman, an artist, a resilient soul. Robert, who had been having fun at first, suddenly felt caught in a trap he hadn't seen coming. His eyes grew hard, his thoughts became confused. The scene he had wanted to orchestrate, that of public humiliation, had backfired. What he had perceived as an unimportant distraction was in reality a vibrant call for dignity, a form of silent rebellion that was beyond him. He didn't understand why the music touched him so deeply, why he felt a dull discomfort rising within him. He had underestimated Claire, and now he found himself facing a version of her he could no longer ignore. The last note of the melody died away in a sigh of air, and the silence that followed was not heavy with unease, but with a form of instinctive respect. Claire, her gaze still fixed on her hands, did not try to capture the admiring glances that turned towards her. The applause burst forth, not from politeness, but from sincere recognition of his talent, of his presence. Robert, on the other hand, got up with difficulty. He hadn't expected this. His words, clumsy and devoid of any sincerity, made their way to his lips with difficulty. It was very good, really. But his voice, trembling, lacked all authority, all power. She had not only played to free herself, but also to break his hold on her. Claire simply responded with a simple "thank you" before leaving the piano, her mind still filled with the echoes of the music. His body, tense earlier, relaxed slightly. She had not only earned his respect, but she had also taken subtle revenge for the look of contempt he had been given. Before leaving the stage for good, Claire turned to him, her eyes filled with quiet strength, and his words echoed in the air. Maybe it's time to stop judging people before understanding who they really are. Robert remained silent. He suddenly felt like a little boy, reduced to the position he thought he could inflict on Claire. He watched her leave, but no words came. The crowd continued to applaud, but Claire was no longer the submissive waitress they had initially imagined. She was the image of dignity rediscovered, of the man or woman who had sought to be crushed but who, on the contrary, rose through their own inner strength. And Robert realized that he had become the object of real humiliation. He had wanted to play, but it was he who had lost.